Lyn Buchanan, one of the most famous remote viewers of all time, saw aliens working with black ops at a U.S. military installation. This is crazy. Get in here. This is Jack Connor with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please hit like, please subscribe, share on social media, and let me know what you think about all this craziness in the comments below. Oh, and if you wanted to support the channel to allow me to make these videos as good as I can make them and as good as you deserve, please consider becoming a channel member. See the first line in the description below to receive exclusive access and videos. Or you can simply leave a tip in the tip jar with a super thanks feature below. Or because I'm a novelist, you could buy one of my books. See the link in the description. Okay, moving on. Here we go. This is from a thread on Twitter by U.F.O. Joe, and I was alerted to this thread by a follower of the channel. So thank you very much for turning me on to this. This is really revealing and fascinating. This is the second or third of the big remote viewers. I think one of the other ones was Ingo Swann in Penetration. And there was another one that had direct encounters with the beings through their work with the military. And this is just amazing. So, it's real confirmation. And this is, I love remote viewing, but these guys are not seeing the beings through remote viewing. They are seeing them directly, which, is even better than remote viewing. So here we go. Reading the thread from UFO Joe. Lyn Buchanan was one of the original remote viewers and trainers in the Army's program at Fort Meade from 84 to 92. I took his 3-day basic controlled remote viewing class in August of 1997 in San Francisco with my ex-wife, a natural psychic. Okay, cool. I guess that's from UFO Joe. I didn't know he did remote viewing. All right, moving on. This is from a podcast with Linda Moulton Howe, and the interview with Lyn Buchanan. I will link to the full podcast. There's no visual to it. Otherwise, I would show that now. Otherwise, I'm just going to read the transcription. But you can feel free to listen to the whole hour-plus podcast. So as Linda Moulton Howe and John Burroughs were interviewing Lyn in 2015, I heard this exchange. Let's just go to the actual exchange. Lyn Buchanan: I had an abduction experience about 25 years before I was in the remote viewing unit, and didn't know about it until I got into the unit. And an incident happened that brought it all up to the surface. But yes, I have. At that time, I met a gray face to face and communicated and so forth. Also, after getting out of service and before I got to the remote viewing unit, I had done some black ops work for different black ops units, and have had the experience of seeing ETs physically. And I'm choosing my words very carefully here, okay? I have had the opportunity of seeing ETs physically, not in remote viewing, but physically being there. In those black ops areas like that, you see something like that, you turn the other way, because believe me, in those areas like that, you don't want to know anything that you don't want to know. Yeah, he laughs. Because, it's inaudible, but I think he said you might not get out. So, yeah. And Linda Moulton Howe says, Lyn, you're implying that we have black ops humans working with extraterrestrials on this planet. Lyn says, no, I'm saying that I have seen extraterrestrials working with humans in black op areas. In human black op areas. Linda says, right, but doesn't that imply they might either be working together or might not be working together? Lyn says, I would say they're working together if they're right there working together. Linda says, I know this is continuing with Lyn. The ones that I saw at Mount Zeal. Zeal is one of 4 locations famed remote viewer Pat Price said via his remote viewing was an ET base. This is from Joe. This is Joe's insertion. Zeal is one of 4 locations famed remote viewer Pat Price said via his remote viewing was an ET base. I believe here Lyn is using saw as in he remote viewed it and didn't see it physically with his own eyes. Okay, yeah, so Lyn Buchanan saw by remote viewing a being at Mount Zeal. Actually, he says he saw many people there that looked exactly like humans, and I just called them humans. So I would suppose I would not be surprised to find out there are humans working with the ETs, and there are ETs working with the humans. And Joe has an insertion here. Joe Murgia, just to clarify, when Lyn claims he saw ETs working alongside humans when he was with a Black Ops unit before he got into the remote viewing unit, he's saying he saw that with his physical eyes when he had entered a Black Ops area. The Mount Zeal info was obtained via remote viewing. So one of the interviewers asks Lyn, how do they communicate? Is it verbally or telepathically? Lyn says, I don't know. The abduction experience I had, I was so focused on this guy's hands, the Gray's hands, that I know that we talked at great length. In fact, when we got to the place where the ship was going, he pulled me out of line with the other abductees, and he said, you don't want to go where they're going. What the fuck? I mean, come on. What the fuck? I mean, seriously. Seriously, dudes. I mean, alien, there's a line of people being abducted. Alien pulls this guy aside, says, you don't want to go where those guys are going. So what was going on with those guys? Where were they going? What were the beings doing with those people? And why was Lyn special in being drawn aside and being spared that fate? Is it because he had this remote viewing ability? Theoretically, we all can learn remote viewing, so I'm not sure if that's true or not. But it is very interesting and very alarming. I like to talk about the positive aspects of the phenomenon. I think it's important to focus on the positive aspects of the phenomenon since we co-create a lot of these experiences. However, independent of our co-creation, there is an actual phenomenon, and some of it is positive, and some of it is kind of sinister. And this is a possible example of that. Now, maybe the being was saying you don't want to go where they're going because for non-sinister reasons, totally possible. Totally possible. I wish the beings would be a little bit more transparent and, actually just come out and answer some of these questions without having to wipe your mind afterward. Because without getting answers to some of these questions, it does sound kind of shady. And, I'm reminded of the missing 411 stuff, as well as other sinister, abduction experiences that I have researched. So anyway, the being pulled Lyn out of line with the other abductees, and he said, you don't want to go where they're going. And we sat on a hillside, and we talked at great length. And people have asked me, did you talk mentally or psychically or physically? And I cannot remember. I have tried to remember, and I can't remember. An interviewer asked, based on the analysis you've done over the years, what would you say is the probability of how they could try to communicate with us? Lyn says, from another experience I had that I cannot talk about at this one, their language, they needed a linguist. Their language seems to be like half physical, half mental, and you can't understand them if you can only talk in one of those ways. You have to be able to mix the two together. So their language seems to be part telepathic, part vocal. That's really interesting because usually when you hear from experiencers, it's the communication is all telepathic. Very rarely do you get a verbal communication from the beings, unless they're the Nordics, or more human shaped beings. But even they prefer telepathy. I believe. I don't know what the stats are on the Nordics on telepathy versus verbal language. Honestly, that would be an interesting thing to know. But yeah, so let me repeat some of that. Um, Based on the analysis you've done over the years, what would you say is the probability of how they could try to communicate with us? And Lyn says, from another experience I had that I cannot talk about. That was kind of the intriguing thing. There's an experience that he can't talk about having to do with their communication. And I found that really intriguing. I wish I knew what that meant. If anybody has any clues or any suggestions, let me know. Let's see. Lyn goes on to say they can manipulate what we perceive of them because at close range they have strong psychic ability if they're the kind that have the psychic ability. And that's something that's come up in my research multiple times, is that the beings are a little jealous of our psychic abilities in that we can communicate very long distances. We can communicate to the other side of the universe psychically. We can our abilities can transverse the whole universe, but our abilities are very weak. They can go far, but they're not very strong in that way. But the beings, they're very strong over a short distance. If you're right in front of them, boom, they can do whatever they want, and their abilities are very, very powerful, but only at a short distance. Is what I have encountered at various times in the research, and so I think that's very interesting. And he's saying that not all of them have the psychic ability, but the ones that do have a very, very strong psychic ability. Let's see, and that was the end of that exchange, but it's not the end of the thread because UFO Joe Murgia, reached out to Lyn. And he actually was able to correspond to Lyn, and I think that's one reason why this particular thread is really valuable, going above and beyond the podcast. So here is the exchange between Joe Murgia and Lyn Buchanan. Joe says, just to clarify, you saw ETs working with humans in black op areas before you joined the remote viewing unit and after you retired from the Army. Lyn says, yes. Joe says, how many times? Only 3. I'd also like to add that most of the times when some outsider, which I always was to these units, comes in, the personnel there don't like to be seen, but they are trapped at their workstation. So they either turn away from the outsider or do something to make themselves unidentifiable at a quick glance. So since when I saw what I thought to be an alien and quickly turned itself away myself, there is always the possibility that it was just some human who had put on some kind of gag mask to hide his or her identity. I don't believe that to be the case in those 3 instances, but I have to still be honest and hold that out as a possibility. And Joe says, what were these ETs doing? Lyn says, that's classified. Sorry. It's really intriguing to me that the existence of the ETs is not classified. But what they were doing is classified. That's just, it's hilarious and alarming at the same time. So yeah, we can know about the beings, but not what they're doing. And not what they're doing with the military, the black ops. So are these carrying out abductions? Are these the joint alien and military government abductions, not to be confused with the my labs, which are the strict military abductions conducted by whatever, group of the military is doing that. But the actual just regular alien abductions where they're working with the military. Is that what they're doing? Or are they working on some sort of technology? Man, that'd be nice to know. Lyn goes on to say, I knew what the unit was doing. He won't say, but he knew. Joe says, did they notice you? I don't really know. I quickly turned away. Did your background in linguistics have anything to do with you being able to see these ETs, or was it just a random thing that had nothing to do with the task you were assigned at the time? Lyn says, my computer skills was why I was in 2 of those places. My language skills only had to do with one of them. And no, I won't go further into that. So again, the language, the communication is very hush-hush, which is fascinating. So, the beings themselves he feels comfortable talking about, but not what they were doing and not what it had to do with communication. That is very intriguing and very fascinating. And Joe asked, can you say what part of the world this happened? And Lyn says no. Joe says, what did they look like? Lyn says 2 were insect-like. 1 was a small gray. Now, when he says insect-like, there's, different sorts of insect-like, beings. The main one that comes up most often is the mantis beings, which appear to be the overseer race of the grays, or at least in charge of the program, whatever they're doing, likely involving abductions. So, it's but it's, there's very few encounters with the mantis people on Earth, walking around a military base like this. So that would be very interesting if that's what that was. But yeah, so Joe says, do you know anybody else who you trust who has seen similar things? Yes, Lyn says. Joe says, some folks think some of these beings are a threat. Do you see that? And I am asking based on your non-remote viewing information. Lyn says, at 3 different times, I saw what appeared to me to be aliens working in work areas that contained at least some Black Ops work. Whether they were working on the Black Ops stuff or something else, or whether they were real or fake, I have no proof or conclusions. That's all I saw. That's all I can honestly say. You know what CRVers describe, that's remote viewers, describe, don't identify. And yeah, it's very, very true. My one and only experience with psychic abilities, I tried to identify what I was seeing, and I got it wrong. I was able to describe it accurately, but when I tried to identify it, I got it wrong. So, yeah. Me and my Reiki group were partnered up with each other, and we were trying to read each other's thoughts. We were projecting an image and trying to read each other's thoughts, pressing our foreheads against each other. And I was picking up on what she was projecting, which is a round, pale, pitted object. And I tried to identify it. I thought it might be a melon. I thought it might be a cantaloupe. But I was wrong. It was the moon. So I was able to describe it and see it, to a certain extent. But I was wrong in identifying it. And I think that is true for a lot of remote viewing as well. So anyway, whether they are working on the Black Ops stuff or something else, describe, don't identify. Lyn Buchanan also says, I haven't jumped to any conclusions about motives, etc., etc., etc. I just told what I saw. And Joe says, so there it is. It's an anecdote that should be taken with a large grain of salt, but I wanted to point it out there and let folks decide for themselves what to make of it. So anyway, I will link to the thread as well as the interview with Lyn Buchanan by Linda Moulton Howe. But this is a fascinating set of exchanges with one of the best remote viewers around. But what he is commenting on here is not remote viewing, but his direct involvement in witnessing of these things. So this is yet one more piece of very solid evidence that the military is working with the beings. And, I've seen an overwhelming amount of evidence for that at this point. I saw another great video on alien reproduction vehicles yesterday that somebody sent me, and thank you for that, because it was a really great video. I'm thinking of covering that as well, but it's just such a long and detailed video. I just, I would have to break that into multiple videos, so I don't know if I want to do that. I may just want to encourage people to go check that video out. But I will think about that. Anyway, all in all, fascinating stuff. The military is working with the beings. What they are doing, Lyn won't talk about. The fact that they're here, he will. So what does that mean? What they're doing is more classified than the presence of the beings themselves. That is just beyond fascinating and honestly kind of alarming. But those are just my thoughts, guys. What do you think about all of this? Please let me know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Please smash the subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss a single video. Please join me on social media. There's Facebook and Twitter links below. And please, if you enjoy these videos, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a channel member. See the first line in the description below, and there's 2 tiers of membership to receive exclusive access in videos. Until next time, this is Jack with Cosmic Road.